Okay, here's a thought to kick us off. What if the very thing driving your team forward, that energy, is actually holding it back?
Or maybe. Maybe the biggest breakthrough isn't what you do next, but how you lead differently.
Exactly. And today we're doing a deep dive into something that feels, well, powerful, but also a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Apostolic leadership.
Right. And we should probably mention our source material for this discussion. It leans heavily on ancient biblical texts, biblical models.
Yeah, good point. So whether you're coming at this from, say, a faith background or maybe a purely secular leadership angle, we think these principles, they're pretty universally relevant for leading teams today.
Absolutely. We're specifically digging into this idea of how to shepherd without smothering.
Shepherd without smothering. I like that.
Yeah, you've really hit on something key there. Our mission really is to distill these powerful insights from the source material you share.
Kind of like giving you a shortcut.
Exactly, a shortcut to understanding this transformative framework that's rooted in these models. We want to help you shift.
Shift from what to what?
From just, managing motion, keeping things busy, to really igniting momentum.
Ah, okay. Turning teams from just passive executors
into passionate pioneers, people who own it.
Because here's the hard truth, and this comes straight from the source material.
Yeah.
Your team doesn't just need a manager.
No.
They need a multiplier. That feels like a really fundamental reframe right there.
It absolutely is, and it points to a core paradox, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, we often see leaders, maybe the ones with the clearest vision, the ones who genuinely care the most, they ironically become the biggest bottlenecks in the whole system. The sources actually call this the control trap.
The control trap.
Yeah.
And it has real costs, right? I mean, the source material talks about disengaged talent, innovation just stalling out completely.
Yeah, the mission plateaus.
And especially now, the world's changing so fast. We've got distributed teams everywhere, a workforce that's, frankly, savvier than ever.
That old way, yesterday's command and control, just won't cut it.
It might work for managing, I don't know, machines.
Maybe, but communities, especially spirit-formed ones, they aren't machines. They're more like living bodies or families, even gardens.
Gardens, I like that metaphor.
Precisely. Right. And that's why our source material suggests this third way. It's presented as a kind of code for high-performance teams.
Okay, so not just soft leadership, not authoritarian.
No, neither of those. It's about being graciously firm.
Graciously firm. Unpack that a bit.
Think of it like leading with a sturdy hand that guides with care, but not like a heavy hand that just crushes initiative.
Okay.
It's leadership that's anchored in, spiritual authority, but also grace-filled strength.
Right.
And it's fiercely committed to seeing others flourish.
So when leaders actually make that shift, moving away from just controlling things
towards being genuinely catalytic influencers.
Yeah. What are the rewards? Mention some big ones.
Oh, the rewards are exponential according to the sources. We're talking movement, resilience, reproduction.
Wow. Not just better quarterly results then.
Not at all. It's about building a living legacy. These apostolic leaders, they don't just build teams, they build movements.
Movements.
Yeah.
So like self-replicating systems.
Exactly. Designed for exponential impact, not just, incremental gains. When you unleash a team like that, it's a complete flip of the script.
Okay, to really get this, we probably need to unpack the word itself, apostolic. It sounds a bit formal.
It does, but the root is important. The Greek word apostolos, it just means one who is sent.
Sent. Okay, so inherently missional.
That's it. It's fundamentally about sending, establishing, releasing others, not dominating or just, protecting the status quo.
And the sources give some powerful examples, don't they? Jesus, for instance, presented as the chief apostle.
Right. Huge authority, but his whole approach was about empowering others, not hoarding control.
And then there's Paul. His pattern seems key, too.
Absolutely. He'd plant communities, churches, he'd offer correction, sure, and encouragement.
But then he'd appoint local leaders.
Yes, like Titus, Timothy. And crucially, he gave them actual room to grow. He avoided that micromanagement trap.
Which leads right into that other paradox you mentioned.
Yeah.
Shepherding without smothering.
Exactly. Think about that image of Jesus as the good shepherd in John's gospel.
Okay.
He knows his sheep, yes, but he leads them out into green pastures. He doesn't just keep them penned up behind fences.
So smothering would be like the opposite. Constant micromanagement.
That overstructuring everything, fostering dependency so people can't act on their own.
Slow decision-making because everything has to go through one person.
Right. And even suppressing talent because maybe it feels threatening. Those are the smothering behaviors.
So what does the true shepherding look like then, in contrast?
True shepherding, according to these texts, involves discernment, real guidance, protection from the wolves, those destructive influences.
Okay.
But while doing that, you're still creating ample space for people to take autonomous, spirit-led action.
Like Paul's model, the 4-generation chain of trust.
Precisely. That's a strategic framework built entirely on entrusting leadership to others, not enclosing it. It's all geared towards leadership multiplication, not just centralized power.
That really does sound like it goes against so much conventional leadership thinking.
It does.
The usual way is, trust has to be earned. You prove yourself first through success, then maybe you get trusted.
Right, that's the world logic. But the sources we looked at highlight this radical trust-first pattern. It's more like call, trust, empower.
And then see the fruitfulness.
Exactly. It requires resting in, let's say, divine wisdom rather than relying on human control mechanisms.
It's a really different cadence.
It is, but you see it played out. Think about Genesis. God trusted Adam and Eve with dominion, actual responsibility.
Before they'd done anything.
Before any performance metrics, yeah. No probationary period.
Wow.
Or Moses and Joshua. Moses spends 40 years, basically, involving Joshua, building that trust relationally.
Long before the public commissioning.
Right. Joshua didn't need to prove himself up the ladder for a promotion in the same way. The trust was already there.
And Jesus with the 12. Maybe the most striking example.
I think so. He sends them out with real authority mid-journey.
While they're still messing up. Still misunderstanding things.
Absolutely. Even then, it's as if the source suggests that trust itself was the very soil needed for their maturity to grow.
So what happens if you reverse that? If control comes first before trust?
Well, it stifles ownership. That's the big one. You see it way back with Jethro warning Moses, right? Saying his over-control would just exhaust everyone and hinder the people.
Right. Exodus 18.
Yeah. It can also lead to really shallow success, like those seeds without deep roots in Jesus's parable. Looks good for a minute, then withers.
And the team members.
They become performers, not partners, driven more by fear of messing up than by a shared vision.
Okay, so if that's a danger, the control trap, what's the antidote? You mentioned collaboration earlier. Is that the key?
The sources really point to collaboration as the true catalyst for genuine movement. That old myth of the lone visionary leader.
Yeah, the genius on the hilltop.
It really needs dismantling, according to this perspective.
So the biblical paradigm is different.
Completely countercultural, really. It suggests the most enduring, spirit-breathed movements don't come from command and control.
They come from
collaborative ecosystems. And here's the twist. The real power of this apostolic leadership isn't in what you accumulate for yourself. It's in what you intentionally give away. Empowering others, equipping them, even setting them up to surpass you, not keeping them dependent.
And the early church examples seem to bear this out.
Absolutely. You see networks, teams working together, these pathways of trust being built.
Like Paul and Barnabas being sent out together.
Yes. Or how Paul was almost never alone. He was always surrounded by co-laborers, partners in the mission.
So the movement happened not because one superstar did everything.
But because many were released, empowered, sent out to do something significant.
Why does that work so well, theologically speaking?
Well, it seems rooted in what the sources call the theology of interdependence. Paul's metaphor of the body is the classic example.
One body, many parts.
With distributed authority, mutual submission. It's not just a nice poem. The sources suggest it actually reflects God's own collaborative nature.
From the very beginning, like in Genesis.
Yeah, let us make man. A kind of divine teamwork and mutual submission right there at the highest level. It's profound.
And historically outside the Bible, too.
We see patterns. Think about that community in Antioch described in Acts. Multi-ethnic, multi-gifted, spirit-led, very collaborative.
Or later movements.
Yeah, like the Moravians, the Wesleyan Revival. Historians often point to the collaborative community aspect as key to their multiplication, not just isolated, powerful personalities. It's almost the opposite of our modern rock star leader model.
It really is. So it all hinges on getting this balance right.
Exactly, a delicate balance.
Okay.
The sources kind of describe the apostolic leader as operating like a living, divine fulcrum.
A fulcrum, like a pivot point.
Yeah, a central point balancing three critical dimensions: vision, authority, and servanthood.
Okay, let's take those one by one. Vision.
Vision is presented as more than just a good idea. It's like a prophetic foresight, a spiritual burden almost, something received in obedience, not just cooked up from ambition.
Like Paul's Macedonian call, that vision that completely redirected him.
Perfect example. But here's the key. That vision, even if it's crystal clear to the leader, it has to be shared, co-owned by the team.
Otherwise.
Otherwise, it risks becoming a tyranny in disguise, as one ancient proverb warns. People follow, but resentfully.
Okay. Vision needs to be shared, then authority.
And this authority, it's shown as being rooted in a calling, not in control for control's sake. It flows from a sense of divine commissioning.
Like Jesus sending out his disciples.
Exactly. And the ultimate model, Jesus washing his disciples' feet, that shows how ultimate authority can actually empower radical humility, not demand dominance. This kind of authority doesn't just wield power, it hosts it. It creates space for others to step up and thrive.
And the third part of the balance beam, servanthood.
Which is described as the essential foundation. You absolutely need it. Without it, vision just becomes coercive.
And authority becomes oppressive.
Right. Yeah. And think about Jesus calling his disciples friends. That wasn't just sentimental. The source implies it was a strategic shift.
From what to what?
From a command-based hierarchy to a relational partnership. That's how you cultivate deep loyalty through dignity, not just duty. It's a powerful combination.
So what happens when that triad, vision, authority, servanthood, falls out of balance?
The consequences are pretty clear in the examples given. Vision without that servanthood piece, it tends towards control, leads to burnout, fear.
Okay. What about authority without vision?
That often decays into just bureaucracy. Rules for rules' sake, stagnation sets in.
And servanthood without real authority?
That can lead to powerlessness, good intentions, maybe, but chaos and mission drift because there's no clear direction or ability to make decisions stick.
So the leader's job is to constantly adjust that fulcrum.
Yes, to correct those imbalances. And the way they do that is by re-engaging with proximity, actually staying close and connected to their people, understanding their reality.
Not leading from an ivory tower.
Right. Proximity plus continually clarifying the vision and maintaining those healthy boundaries.
To really make this concrete, the source material uses this great metaphor, doesn't it? A tale of two gardens.
Yes, it's a vivid way to illustrate the contrasting leadership postures and, importantly, their outcomes.
So, first garden.
First, imagine the controlled garden. Visually, it's probably neat, very ordered, maybe even looks perfect on the surface. But it's also sterile, fragile.
Reflecting what kind of leadership?
A style driven primarily by fear. Fear of failure, fear of losing control. So lots of micromanagement, constant policing of the rules.
And the results?
Short term, you might get compliance, people do what they're told. But long term, the sources suggest it leads towards collapse, burnout, high turnover, a culture that's brittle and resists any kind of innovation.
Is there a biblical example of this?
King Saul is often presented this way in the narratives. Consumed by fear and insecurity, he grasps for control, makes impulsive decisions.
And ultimately loses the kingdom, loses trust.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale.
That sounds pretty exhausting, honestly, for everyone involved. So what's the alternative? The other garden.
Okay, contrast that with the cultivated garden. This one is vibrant, alive, maybe a little messy, but definitely thriving.
And the leader here?
The leader acts like a true gardener, preparing the soil, watering, pruning when necessary, but not constantly hovering and dominating every plant.
So this reflects that apostolic leadership.
Yes. Vision-bearing, yes, but also culture-shaping and person-empowering.
Yeah.
There's a fundamental trust that, a higher power, God, gives the increase.
And the outcomes here?
A flourishing team, people taking real ownership, gifts emerging naturally from all over, not just the top. And when correction is needed, it happens in the spirit of love and restoration, not condemnation.
And
Crucially, the leader, the gardener, can actually step back sometimes, and the whole thing doesn't fall apart. It has its own life.
Like Paul saying, I planted, Apollos watered.
But God gave the growth. Exactly. He understood his role was cultivation, not ultimate control.
Or Jesus, the master gardener, I am the vine, you are the branches.
That's the image. And making that shift from the controlled garden mindset to the cultivated one, it requires real internal transformation.
A death to ego. the source calls it.
Yeah, that's strong language, but it points to letting go of the need to be the center, the one with all the answers. It means clarifying mission and values together.
Actively empowering people.
Fostering open communication, prioritizing people's actual formation, their growth over just their function or output.
And celebrating diversity, not demanding uniformity.
Exactly. It's a profound shift in mindset and practice.
So let's get really practical. How do we apply this framework? How do you actually shift from just managing tasks to, as you said, shepherding destinies?
Okay, first big shift. Discernment over dictation. Leaders operating this way lead more by revelation, you could say, not just reason alone.
Like the sons of Issachar in the Old Testament, understanding the times.
Exactly. Understanding the times and knowing what God's people should do. Practically, this means building actual margin into your planning.
Margin for what?
For divine redirection, being open to it, just like Paul experienced multiple times where the Spirit literally rerouted his entire ministry journey. You have to be listening.
Okay, discernment over dictation. What else?
Empowerment over enforcement. This is huge. True spiritual leaders, apostolic leaders, understand their influence isn't proven by how many people obey them.
But by
How many people rise up under their leadership, how many others are released into their own callings.
Paul modeled this.
Consistently. Calling Timothy my son and trusting entire regions and significant tasks to others, it's about equipping and then actually trusting. Providing, say, boundaries, not building boxes.
Boundaries, not boxes. I like that.
Third, a focus on development over dependence. The aim isn't just to gather followers.
It's two.
It's to raise sons and daughters, spiritually speaking, multiplying leaders. The goal isn't cloning yourself, but seeing Christ formed in others, as Paul put it.
Which involves practical things like
Intentional coaching, delegating real authority, not just tasks, structuring actual mentorship pathways, investing in people's growth.
Okay, and the last one.
Grace over griping. Lead with mercy and vision, especially when things go wrong.
How do you address errors then?
Redemptively. Viewing every failure, every mistake, not as a final judgment, but as formation in progress.
Like Jesus with Peter after the denial.
Exactly. Peter failed spectacularly, but Jesus didn't write him off. He recommissioned him. Apostolic leaders create that kind of grace-filled space for growth and restoration.
Okay, so those are the big shifts. How do we put that graciously firm idea into practice day to day?
Well, start with grace first. Always. Actively create a culture of psychological safety. Assume positive intent in people, like Jesus did with Peter, calling him a rock even knowing his future stumbles. Lead with empathy. Ask redemptive questions when something goes wrong instead of just jumping to judgment.
But grace first doesn't mean only grace.
Right.
The firm part matters too.
Absolutely. Safety doesn't mean no structure or accountability. At the same time, you need firm boundaries. Build with clarity and conviction.
Define things clearly.
Define clear expectations, roles, values. Paul did this constantly with the early churches. And then hold people accountable, consistently. But view that accountability as protective for them and the mission not punitive. It's guiding them toward flourishing, not just catching them out.
Okay, grace first, firm boundaries. What else?
Apply strategic freedom. Release the potential that's within that structure. Empower people. Don't micromanage them.
So within those clear boundaries.
Let team members have freedom to innovate, to experiment, to find the best way. Delegate outcomes, not just dictate every single action. Trust the genius of the body, that collective wisdom and gifting.
And finally, how do you sustain momentum?
Through relationship. Regular check-ins, not just checkups.
That's the difference.
Checkups feel like scrutiny, focused only on performance metrics. Check-ins are about genuine support, focusing on growth, well-being, connection, as well as the work.
Like Jesus rejoicing with his disciples when they returned from ministry.
Yes. Celebrating the wins, but then also gently reorienting their focus. It's about that relational connection being the engine.
So as we're listening to this, how can we do a quick self-assessment? How do we gauge our own apostolic maturity, so to speak?
Good question. Maybe start with vision clarity. Ask yourself, can I declare heaven's assignment, our core mission, simply? Is it genuinely spirit-breathed or just my own good idea? Is it clear enough to actually mobilize people?
Like the prophet Habakkuk, write the vision plain.
Exactly. Then here's a tough one, the quiet litmus test maybe. Delegation trust. Do you truly empower or do you tend to hover?
Oh, yeah.
Are you really transferring authority like those biblical examples of handing over keys or just delegating tasks you don't want to do?
Okay, vision, trust. What about feedback?
Yeah, what's your feedback style? Does it generally build people up, or does it tend to break them down? Is your feedback focused on helping them grow formation delivered with that gracious truth?
Gracious truth, and then multiplication.
Are you multiplying leaders, or are you mainly just maintaining followers? Are you actively mentoring, creating platforms, pushing others into the spotlight?
And maybe the deepest one, the insecurity check.
Can you genuinely celebrate the success of others on your team, even when they shine brighter than you, without feeling diminished or threatened?
That's a big one. Secure leaders, the source suggests, champion others without fear.
Absolutely. Ultimately, this whole idea of apostolic leadership, it's about leading like Jesus, the Shepherd King, embodying that vision, that authority rooted in service, that servanthood.
It's that journey from the controlled garden to the cultivated one.
Right. Focused on building movements that last, not just managing organizations for the short term. It's about raising leaders who then go on to raise other leaders.
All through that graciously firm posture.
That's the heart of it.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with, something to chew on. What would it look like starting today to lead in such a way that maybe your grandchildren would admire it? Even if your name was eventually forgotten, but your people, the ones you invested in, were multiplying kingdom impact far, far beyond your own reach.